In the heart of an endless countryside, where the horizon melted into the sky and the sun dipped low in a golden farewell, lay a wheat field that had seen better days. Once proud and towering, the golden stalks now bowed under the weight of time and neglect. A gentle breeze whispered through the field, carrying with it a fragile peace, until the silence was shattered by a sudden commotion. Grace, a chestnut mare with a coat that gleamed like polished mahogany, staggered through the field. Her once graceful form now betrayed her age. Her legs buckled, and a jagged wound oozed crimson down her shoulder. Above, birds scattered from their perches, their wings slicing through the air as tension gripped the field. But from the shadow of the barn, a black streak shot forward. Shadow, a scrappy little cat with eyes like emeralds. She didn't meow. She didn't panic. Instead, she pressed her ear to Grace's heaving chest, listening intently to the rhythm of her heartbeat. In that moment, Shadow understood. This wasn't curiosity. This was a warning, deep and primal. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the scene, Shadow tore toward the farmhouse. By sunrise, the vet would marvel at Grace's survival. But Shadow knew the truth. She had been waiting for this moment for years. Grace wasn't supposed to survive the auction. She was too old, too thin, her hip bones jutting out like broken fence posts. The farmer, weary from the heat of the day, had walked past her pen, his heart heavy with the burden of choice. But then he stopped. The mare was nuzzling a scrawny black kitten, its fur matted with mud. The kitten purred loudly, kneading Grace's cracked hoof with tiny claws. "You two come as a pair." "Hey," the farmer muttered, a smile breaking through his exhaustion. He bought them both for the price of a bale of hay, sealing a bond that would defy the boundaries of species. For 5 years, Grace and Shadow were inseparable. Shadow curled against Grace's flank, her small body radiating warmth on chilly nights. One paw always rested on the mare's leg, a silent promise of loyalty. When summer storms shook the barn, Grace stood firm, her body a shield against the rain. In return, Shadow groomed the burrs from Grace's manner with rough, precise licks, a testament to their unspoken connection. But Shadow had secrets. She would vanish for days, returning with gifts, a dead mouse, a frayed blue ribbon, even a silver key. The farmer joked that she worked night shifts, and Grace never judged. Instead, she would nicker softly, nudging the offerings with her nose as if to say, "Good job." Then came the drought. The fields turned to dust, the golden wheat wilting under the relentless sun. Grace's ribs pressed sharply against her coat, and Shadow's hunts grew desperate. One midnight, the farmer caught her dragging a carrot from the kitchen, her teeth sunk into its tip. "You freeloader," he scolded, but Grace didn't care. She ate the carrot anyway, crunching slowly as Shadow watched, her tail flicking with pride. The vet had once said that horses and cats don't bond. But tell that to Shadow, who licked the salt from Grace's tears after coyotes cornered them in the north pasture. Or to Grace, who stood guard for 12 hours when Shadow gave birth to 3 kittens in the hayloft, snorting warnings at anyone who dared approach. They weren't just friends. They were survivors, bound together by the trials they faced. As the drought dragged on, the earth cracked like shattered pottery beneath their hooves. Grace's breaths grew labored, her once glossy coat dulled to ash. Shadow stopped disappearing. She shadowed the mare's every step, her green eyes sharp, her tail twitching at every wheeze. On the fateful morning when everything changed, Grace was grazing near the dried-up creek. Shadow perched on a fence post, watching intently. Without warning, Grace's front legs folded beneath her. She hit the dirt with a thud that sent crows screaming into the sky, the sound echoing across the desolate landscape. Her wound wasn't new, a gash on her shoulder, hidden under matted fur, now oozing yellow and red. Shadow leaped down, instinctively knowing what needed to be done. No meows, no panic. She pressed her ear to Grace's chest, then sprinted toward the farmhouse. The farmer was fixing a tractor, grease smeared across his hands. Shadow yowled, a sound like ripping metal, raw and urgent. He shrugged her off. "Not now, pest," he muttered, too caught up in his work to notice the urgency in her eyes. But Shadow wouldn't give up. She returned to Grace, her heart pounding. In a moment of desperation, she did something she had never done before. She bit the mare's ear, hard. Grace's eyelids fluttered, a weak snort escaping her lips. "Stay awake," it seemed to say. With renewed determination, Shadow darted back to the road. A delivery truck rumbled past, and she lunged at its tires, hissing. The driver swerved, yelling, "Crazy cat." But no one stopped. As dusk approached, Grace's breath turned shallow. Shadow burrowed against her neck, purring louder than a diesel engine. It was a survival tactic. Cats purr to heal. But the mare's heartbeat slowed, a painful reminder of the fragility of life. Then, headlights pierced the darkness. The vet's pickup arrived, here for a routine checkup on the sheep. Shadow launched herself at the windshield, a black blur under the moonlight. The vet slammed the brakes, startled. "What the—" The cat raced toward the field, stopping twice to scream back at him, her urgency palpable. He followed, his heart racing as he sensed the gravity of the situation. When his flashlight beam hit Grace, he froze, dropping to his knees beside her. Shadow paced in circles around him, fur bristling with anxiety. Pressures dropping, infection septic, he muttered, probing the wound. A stench of rot hit him, gangrene. How did I miss this? Grace's eyes rolled back, and Shadow lunged forward, swatting the vet's stethoscope away. "Back off!" he snapped, but the cat hissed, fangs bared, then pressed her paw to Grace's cheek. A weak whinny escaped the mare's lips, a plea for help. The vet flushed the wound, but pus kept bubbling up. Antibiotics, fluids, useless. Grace's veins had collapsed. "Come on, girl," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "Don't die on my watch." Shadow yowled, her claws sinking into his sleeve, dragging his hand toward the wound. "Stop it!" He backed, but she was relentless. This time, he noticed it. A splinter would bury deep within the wound. He tugged, and out came a shard of fence post, wrapped in rusted wire. Tetanus. His stomach dropped. There was no antivenom here. No time. He radioed the equine clinic. Close. The nearest blood bank. 2 hours away. Grace's breath turned to rasp, and Shadow climbed onto her chest, purring violently. A rumble so loud the vet felt it in his bones. "That helps how?" he muttered, astonished. Then the cat vanished. 10 minutes later, a bark echoed through the night. Shadow streaked back, soaked and limping. Behind her trotted Duke, the farmer's border collie, carrying a muddy-full bag in his jaws, tubing trailing behind him like a snake. The vet's own supply shed had been raided. "What the—" Duke dropped the bag, tail wagging. Shadow headbutted the dog's side, a silent thank you. The vet stared, disbelief washing over him. "You planned this?" There was no time for questions. He rigged a transfusion from Duke, whose blood type miraculously matched. "This'll kill her or save her," he warned the animals. Shadow licked Grace's forehead, a silent vow. Save her. The vet's hand shook as he worked. The tubing kinked, and Shadow batted it straight with her paw. "Since when are you a nurse?" he exclaimed, incredulous. Drip by drip, Grace stirred. Her eyelid twitched, and Shadow's purr dialed louder, vibrating the very air around them. At 3 a.m., the mare's legs jerked, a feeble attempt to stand. "Whoa, easy." The vet braced her shoulder. "You're both insane," he breathed, laughter mingling with disbelief. But Shadow wasn't celebrating. She sniffed Grace's wound, tail lashing in agitation. One claw hooked a thread of black sludge that the vet had missed. It reeked of decay. "Wait! That's not tetanus." He bagged the sample for lab testing. The results would later confirm it. Venom from a Crotalus horridus, a timber rattler declared extinct in the area decades ago. Shadow knew that smell. She'd tasted it before, years ago, in a den raised by bulldozers. Her scars itched at the memory of that day. The vet collapsed against the tractor, adrenaline crashing. Shadow climbed onto Grace's back, something she had never dared to do before. The mare wobbled but held steady, turning her head to nuzzle the cat's sodden fur. Together, they limped toward the barn, dawn staining the sky a bruised purple. The farmer found them at sunrise, the vet snoring in the hay, Shadow curled on his chest, and Grace standing guard, a sentinel in the morning light. Empty 4 bags littered the ground. "What in the farmer began, disbelief etched on his face. The vet groaned awake, rubbing his eyes. "Your cat's a war hero," he muttered, still dazed from exhaustion. Grace nickered softly, and Shadow flicked her tail, casual as if this were an everyday occurrence. Later that day, the lab results came back. The vet stormed into the barn, printouts crumpled in his fist. "Timber rattlesnake venom. Here." He thrust the paper at the farmer. "This species died out in the 1980s. Shadow flattened her ears, sensing the rising tension. She knew that smell, burnt sugar mixed with copper. 5 years ago, she dragged herself into this barn, a festering bite on her leg from a snake that wasn't supposed to exist. The farmer paled, the pieces falling into place. That old mining tunnel. Kid said they saw something down there last month. He had ignored the rumors, but now Grace's wound pulsed with undeniable proof. The vet gripped the stall door, his mind racing. This venom attacks muscles, not blood. That's why I missed it. But Shadow didn't. He turned to the cat, who was methodically licking Grace's foresight. "How'd you know?" Shadow blinked slowly, her green eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that transcended words. The farmer crouched, eye level with her. "Where'd you come from?" "Here?" "Before the auction." Shadow stared past him, her tail twitching. Secrets stayed secrets. Grace nudged the vet's pocket, prompting him to pull out a sugar cube, her favorite treat. Shadow swatted it to the ground, snarling. "What's your problem?" the vet exclaimed, taken aback. The cat pounced on the cube, burying it in hay. "No sweets. Not now." Sugar would accelerate the venom spread. She'd learned that the hard way. The vet's phone rang, interrupting their tense moment. It was the lab again. "You're sure it's Crotalus horridus?" he demanded, his heart racing. Static crackled on the line. "Positive. And we found something else. Fungus growing in the venom sample. A rare type that eats synthetic materials. Synthetic, like the 4-tubing Shadow had stolen." The vet's hands shook as he processed the information. "That fungus, is it airborne?" "Not yet," the voice on the other end replied. He hung up, dread pooling in his stomach. Grace's wound had been packed with gauze, the same gauze now dissolving in his trash can, consumed by black mold. "We need to burn everything," he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. But Shadow was already moving. She leapt onto the workbench, knocking a lighter into the farmer's boot. Then she dragged a gas canister from the corner, claw marks scoring its sides. "You want us to torch the barn?" the farmer yelled, incredulous. Grace stamped her hoof, a clear message. Yes. They worked quickly, piling feed bags, blankets, anything that had touched the venom in the field. Shadow herded the chickens away as flames roared to life. The vet watched her, a question burning louder than the fire. How many times had she done this before? At dusk, Shadow led Grace to the pond. The mare hesitated, unsure. The cat waded in first, lapping at the water. Detox. Drink. Grace obeyed, her instincts guiding her. The vet took notes, astonished. The fungus can't survive in alkaline water. She knew that. The farmer lit a cigarette, his hand steady for the first time all day. That cat's got a Ph.D. in weird. But Shadow's gaze was miles away, fixed on the dark silhouette of the abandoned mine. A low growl rumbled in her throat. They are still down there. Grace healed slowly, the vet visiting daily, armed with alkaline supplements and disbelief. Her muscle regeneration. "It's like nothing I've seen," he told the farmer. Shadow monitored every dose, swatting the syringe if he measured wrong. The farmer started digging through auction records and old news clippings. A 15-year-old headline screamed, "Biotech lab explodes. Test animals missing." The lab, 3 miles from the abandoned mine. He found Shadow sunbathing on Grace's back. "You're not a cat, are you?" he mused aloud. She stared, unblinking. Defined cat. Grace knows his pocket, and he offered her an apple. Shadow let it slide, knowing the venom was neutralized and the sugar safe now. The crunch echoed through the quiet barn, a moment of normalcy amid the chaos. That night, Shadow brought a new gift, a corroded metal tag etched with Project 11. The farmer's blood ran cold. The lab's escapees had been injected with fungal-resistant genes. Survivors. He confronted the vet. "You ever hear of cross-species gene therapy?" The vet froze, realization dawning. That illegal crap from the 90s. They tried splicing animal DNA with mushrooms. The farmer tossed him the tag. "Guess who's part portobello?" They watched Shadow groom Grace's scar, her saliva glowing faintly under UV light, a fungal side effect. She's not just healing Grace, the vet realized. She's reprogramming her cells. The farmer pocketed the tag, a sense of urgency filling the air. "We don't tell a soul. But secrets rot faster than venom." At dawn, Shadow led Grace to the mine's entrance. The mare snorted, nostrils flaring at the stench. Rotting vegetation and something sharper. Antiseptic. Bleach. Shadow's fur stood on end, her instincts screaming. 5 years ago, she'd fled this hole with a bullet graze on her ear and a belly full of hybrid kittens. None survived, until now. A rock shifted, and Grace reared as a scaled tail slithered into the shadows. Not a snake. Worse. They galloped back, dust billowing behind them. The farmer found them trembling at the trough. "What's out there?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Shadow dropped a clump of fur at his feet, steel gray, stinking of chemicals. Not from any local animal. The vet DNA tested it. Canis lupus, with Ophiocordyceps mutations. He swallowed hard. They weaponized the fungus. Made it contagious. The farmer grabbed his shotgun, adrenaline surging. How many? If one's alive, the vet checked Shadow, whose green eyes reflected his fear. There's a peck. The howl pierced the midnight air. It was neither wolf nor machine, but something in between. Shadow stood on the roof, fur crackling with static. Grace stamped in her stall, ready. But the farmer's hand froze on the stable door. They're not after livestock. The vet aimed his flashlight, illuminating 20 glowing eyes that blinked back at them from the darkness. They're here for her. In that moment, the bond between Grace and Shadow solidified into something unbreakable. They were not just survivors. They were warriors, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, illuminating the field with a golden hue, they prepared to confront the darkness that threatened their world. Together, they would fight. Together, they would survive. And as the sun rose, casting long shadows behind them, they knew that their story was far from over. The battle for their lives and for the truth was just beginning.